Hello, this is Yannick Mitushevich, and my video presentation will be reviewing the book The Third Reich at War by Richard J. Evans. Born in September of 1947 in Woodford, Essex, the author Richard J. Evans enveloped himself in German history at a very young age by traveling to Germany for his studies. Richard Evans would then go on to teach his historical knowledge about Germany at around 7 different universities around the world, even later becoming the president of Cambridge's Wolfson College. Though he has written a total of 18 different books, his most popular are his Third Reich trilogies. The 30 volumes that are present in the trilogy include The Coming of the Third Reich, The Third Reich in Power, and The Third Reich at War. The first volume, The Coming of the Third Reich, covers its information from around 1871 to around 1933, where it elaborates about the unification of Germany. Events in World War I, and also the Nazi seizement of German power after the war. The second volume, The Third Reich in Power, describes how Germany changes into a totalitarian dictatorship thanks to the help of Hitler and his followers during the 1930s. Finally, we reach the third volume, The Third Reich at War, which describes the Third Reich between the years of 1939 and 1945, beginning with the invasion of Poland and then ending with the fall of Nazi Germany after World War II. This book review will cover the first 350 pages of the Third Reich at War by giving key points and analysis that Richard Evans presents in his writing. One of the main reasons I had chosen this book for my review is because I expected Evans to go more in depth when discussing the topic of Poland and Nazi Germany. As a Polish person myself, I wanted to really understand the history of my own heritage. So I was very relieved when nearly the first 100 pages of the book are primarily about Poland. The beginning of the book starts off immediately with a key event that needs to be addressed: the Nazi German attack on Poland. The book introduces the German army as a menacing and powerful force, thanks to the book's illustration of how Germans aggressively crossed Poland's borders and rapidly attacked. Adding on to Nazi Germany's intimidation factor, Hitler enforced his military to utilize the lightning war strategy, also known as blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg tactics required the concentration of offensive weapons, such as tanks, planes, and artillery, along a narrow front. These forces would then drive a breach into the enemy defenses, permitting armored tanks divisions to penetrate rapidly and roam freely behind the enemy lines, causing shock and disorganization among the enemy defenses. German air power then prevented the enemy from adequately resupplying or redeploying forces, and thereby from sending reinforcements to seal breaches in the front. German forces could in turn encircle opposing troops and force surrender. This exact sort of tactic was used to rapidly take Poland in 1939. A common description that Evans uses in this part of the book is illustrating that the Nazi Germans as beasts in human form. This goes hand in hand with how Nazi Germans are characterized to be Hitler's hounds. It is apparent that Evans focused on characterizing the Germans with dogs because it makes them seem very threatening and gives them a sense of obedience towards their leader, Adolf Hitler. Additionally, by describing the very hostile nature of the Nazi military, it intensifies the Nazi intimidation that Evans is attempting to display. After Evans finishes up writing about the German Reich, about how the German Reich seized the mass amount of Polish territory, leading to Poland's dissipation, he then begins to describe the life of Polish citizens living in Nazi Polish locations. Hitler abandoned his initial idea to let Poles govern themselves in a rump state, and instead, Polish citizens were controlled and dictated by the Nazi government themselves. The Polish lived in misery under their German government. Civilians who were located in German-occupied Poland were discriminated against by the SS task force, police units, and simply regular German soldiers. The Polish endured horrific abuse and terrible living conditions, which continued for a long time. Within this part of the book, Evans seems to be giving Nazi Germany a very bad rap. Firstly, Evans provides detail about how the aggressive Nazi invasion of Poland, and then he provides examples of how Polish citizens were mistreated afterward by regular military Nazi soldiers. These events sadly did occur, but Evans fails to give the German soldiers any sort of justice and acts as if they are just working off pure evil. Looking at it from a different perspective, the German soldiers were people who were simply following their government's orders. This menace that is portrayed in the Nazi German military only snowballs as this book continues. After providing a sufficient amount of information about the Nazi and the Polish people, Evans unveils Adolf Hitler's true intentions: total Germanization. Calling it the new racial order, Hitler's goal was to create the master race. The book lists qualities that would not be able to be considered part of this master race, which include any sort of disability or characteristic that makes a person seem weaker or lesser of a human being. This includes the religion that a person believes in. The new racial order proposed by the Nazis was founded on the belief that non-Germans were inferior and should be removed and replaced by pure Germans and Aryans. Nazi methods on such people included colonization, expulsions, severe repression, plunder of property, and exorbitant taxation, imposition of forced labor, seizure of children, ghettoization, and starvation-level food rations for the non-German population. When Richard Evans was writing about the new racial order, Nazi German tactics of total Germanization seemed to be getting worse and worse. The book started by providing examples of complete extermination of anyone who was non-German. I believe that Evans did this purposely in order to slowly and surely increase the shock factor so that the reader would continuously be intimidated by the Nazi German tactics. Some readers may try to claim that the groups that were discriminated against, which included Poles, Jews, disabled, and gypsies, should have simply joined forces. But Evans dissipates this claim by saying that Hitler was not worried about a joined force because his power was simply too devastating. The new racial order part of the book lessened its focus on Polish citizens and gave more details regarding how Jews were being treated. Evans makes it clear that if Poles are considered second-class citizens, then Jews are scarcely qualified as human beings at all by the German government. Anyone who is even part Jew would be hunted down and oftentimes eliminated by the Gestapo through mass killings by the use of carbon monoxide. This was also done to Polish citizens, the disabled, and gypsies. Once again, this book gives no human characteristic to any of the German soldiers who were told to accomplish this. It must be assumed that some Nazi soldiers were only following their leaders' orders and did not actually want to kill anyone. But Evans wants to leave these sort of viewpoints out in order to emphasize the Nazi German evil. When reading about the new racial order, the most interesting thing that I learned in the German use of compulsory sterilization on their own citizens. This means that if a person has poor hereditary factors, such as being disabled, mentally ill, or even just short, they might be sterilized, which would prevent them from having any sort of future children. The reason for this is to prevent certain weak generations from continuing, because it is necessary that the German race includes only the best of the best. This interested me because it was quite shocking. The book talked a lot about damage that Nazi Germany did to other people in other countries, but I did not realize that Germany oftentimes even targeted their own kind. However, this book does not only focus all of its key ideas just around the new racial order, because World War II would soon force the Third Reich to participate in intense battles. After talking quite a bit about the Nazi Germany's government way of ruling, the book starts to mention things relating to the actual start of World War II. This includes events such as when Great Britain and France declared war on Germany on September 3rd after Nazi Germany had invaded Poland. However, according to Evans, the British and French events were not as important to mention as the German-Soviet relations, because the book includes a lot more detail about the latter. To start, the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact divided Polish territory between the two superpowers. After they had both attacked Poland from the two sides of the country, they met in the middle. The book stressed the fact that this pact created consternation amongst other countries such as Great Britain and France, which only grew after Germany received more Polish land than they initially meant to have. Although Adolf Hitler had congratulated himself on the German-Soviet non-aggression pact of 1939, as a matter of expediency, he then became acutely suspicious of the intentions of the Soviet leader, Joseph Stalin. Characterizing him as a very evil person, the book states he began to feel that he could not afford to wait to complete the subjugation of Western Europe, as he had originally planned before dealing with the Soviet Union. It's clear that Evans is setting up the scene of the book for what is to come, which is the Nazi German betrayal of their pact with the Soviet Union. On June 22nd, 1941, the German offensive was launched by the three army groups under the same commanders who directed the invasion of France in 1940. The book once again described the German military as very aggressive through their use of blitzkrieg tactics. Slowly and surely, as the German drive against Moscow slackened, the Soviets were waiting for their chance to counter the attack. Finally, on December 6th, the Soviet commander on the Moscow front, General Zhukov, inaugurated the first great counteroffensive of the Soviet Union. This is mentioned so clearly in the book because of the swing of power that is seen between the German and Soviet Union. From that battle, Evans suddenly made Germany look inferior, which has not been the case throughout the entirety of the book. By making the Nazi-Soviet relations so obvious in this book, Evans sets himself up to most likely make a claim that this broken relationship is a true reason for Nazi Germany's failure in World War II. As a quick summary, the first 350 pages of the book, The Third Reich at War, focus their key points around the Nazi invasion of Poland, the Nazis' new racial order, and the broken relationship the Nazis had between the Soviets. A common trait within each of these focus points is that they displayed a very dark image of Germany and accented all the terrible results that occurred from the German actions. Sure enough, most of these things that Nazi Germans did was undisputably terrible, but the book doesn't seem to have many negatives against other countries. Nevertheless, Evans meant to focus around these major points in order to make an accurate claim about Germany's failure, to which the reader will agree with later on. Overall, I found The Third Reich at War interesting, but it lacked the analysis that I like to read about. In this case, I feel like Mr. Baker disagrees with me, but I did not feel like this book had that much analysis. The book was mostly just a giant summary, which could be useful for extracting information, but it can also be pretty boring. Nevertheless, I will continue to read this book whenever I have free time because it accented the history of World War II about Poland, which is the main reason that I had chosen to read it. Ultimately, I do highly suggest this book for anyone interested purely in history or World War II, but I would not suggest it for people who hope for analysis or people who bore easily from a lot of detail. Thanks for listening, guys.